In this video, I'm going to tell you the top 5 things that you need to know about a piece of property before you buy it. And guess what? This is not broad strokes advice. These are things that I've actually seen buyers have angst about post-purchase. But don't worry, along the way, I'm going to give you some free resources and I'm going to tell you how you find out these things about a place. So I'm not going to leave you hanging with a bunch of random tips. Welcome to Landowner TV, where I make you smarter about your property one video at a time. My name is Michael Morrow, and I'm a land agent in the state of Texas, and I love talking about land. It is really my favorite topic. And on this channel, I cover topics that landowners frequently have questions about. Things like livestock and conservation and wildlife management and hunting and sometimes real estate transactions. So if you're a landowner or someone who just enjoys learning about land, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Okay, so let's dive right in. We're going to start with my number 5 thing to know, and that's floodplains. Floodplains are kind of a big deal. Although lowlands and riparian areas are frequently the most productive areas of the landscape, giving rise to bottomland hardwoods and duck blinds and really productive pastures, you certainly wouldn't want to go build a barn or certainly a residence in a floodplain. What you may not have thought about is that you also don't want to cross a floodplain between your front gate and wherever your residence is on your land. If you're going to borrow money to make a land purchase, your lender will most of the time find this out, especially if you're going to be building a house on this place. But you don't want to be in a situation where you're through your option period or at closing and you find out part or most of the area floods on an annual basis. So I would encourage you in advance to find out whether or not there are floodplains and where they are on a specific tract of land that you're looking to buy. The good news is this is super easy to do. FEMA has made a really easy to use online map viewer that will let you zoom in to your place and look at floodplain data. I've attached the link of this website in the description of the video. You can also check out the article version of this video that I posted on landassociation.org. Simply go to the website, zoom to your area of interest, and you'll find out which kind of floodplain you have. There's several zones, there's a lot of definitions, all that's available on the website and free to use to you. One piece of information on floodplains is a 100-year floodplain doesn't mean that it floods once every 100 years. It means that there's a 1% chance of that size flood happening every year. For a quick reference on this, you can ask the city of New Braunfels, who I think in 10 years had 2 500-year floods. Okay, number 4 is soil limitations. My apologies to the soils experts out there, but this does sound like one of the more boring things to talk about. But I can assure you this is something that you need to understand as a buyer about that place. I've got a pretty extreme example here, but it's true, so I'm going to tell it. I was with the owner of a ranch in South Texas, and he had just bought this place. He was under construction for a lodge on this hilltop that was wrapped around with a big draw. And his vision was to be able to have a lake in where that draw was. Unfortunately, where he wanted to put the lake was almost pure sand, and I mean deep. So there was no scraping down the clay layer, which you could do. The entire lake, around 8 acres, was going to require a PVC liner to be buried under a couple of feet of soil and then filled. And oh, by the way, in that instance, they were going to need a 4-inch pump pumping almost 24 hours a day to keep up with evapotranspiration during the summer. I know that's a little bit of a sidebar, but dang, that's a lot of work for a lake. And soils has more to do with just whether you want a lake. Soils can impact the foundation of your house, the road to your house, whether or not you're going to be able to have a good garden, what kind of species will grow best in your pasture, and what kind of septic system you're going to require. Look, soils vary pretty dramatically throughout the landscape, from very sandy to very clayey. Yeah, clayey is a word. Heavy clay soils can have a very high shrink swell potential. You see this through the blackland prairies of central Texas, but they're scattered sporadically through the state. When I say shrink swell potential, when those soils are really wet, they swell up. And in the summertime, when it dries out, they shrink, and they can form those big cracks that you see in soils. And those high shrink swell capacity soils can be hell on your foundation. On the other end of the thing, you get the really sandy soils. Sandy soils don't shrink and swell, but they can be drouthy. Yes, drouthy is also a word, meaning they don't hold water very well. So after a rain, that rain percolates very quickly through that sand and doesn't hold a lot of water in that soil profile and keep it available for a long time for those plants to absorb. Soils with high sand content also can be very erosive, meaning if you don't have a consistent cover crop on those soils, they can erode away very quickly. But guess what? I have good news here too. I have a top secret tool called the Web Soil Survey that is free to use and full of incredible information that you can access right now about the place that you want to buy. Like I said, it's free, and I use this when I'm evaluating a property every single time. It'll tell you things like expected forage production, wildlife productivity, farm and garden productivity, tree productivity. It can also tell you limiting factors like depth to bedrock and shrink swell potential like we just mentioned. You can get all that from Web Soil Survey. In fact, I think I'm going to do a complete video just on how to use the Web Soil Survey. So stick around for that one. And like the FEMA flood map I just mentioned, a link is also in the description of this video and on landassociation.org. The third thing you need to understand about a place before you buy it are existing easements or mineral rights. Now I know easements are a bit different than mineral rights, but I grouped them together for a particular reason. Easements exist as encumbrances on the land. It gives someone else the right to use that land for a specific use for a specific amount of time. There are surface and there are subsurface easements. Let's go over surface easements really fast. There are a lot of different kinds of surface easements, but the most common ones are pipeline right-of-ways, highline right-of-ways. Now there are wind farms. Another kind of easement may be an access easement that someone else has the right to cross your land to access their land, and they may have an easement to do that. The important part here is to understand if the land that you're buying has any of those surface easements and what's the available use to the owning party. In other words, for a pipeline easement or even a highline easement, the pipeline company or the highline company have the right to come across your property and maintain that easement sometimes once or twice a year. So in that case, it's important to understand what rights of access the easement holders have. Now let's talk about subsurface easement. Look, I am not an attorney and I'm not giving any legal advice, but I can say it's important to understand who owns the mineral rights to the place that you're buying for a couple of reasons. Just so you know, in Texas, the surface estate can be permanently severed from the mineral estate. And in Texas, the mineral estate is the dominant estate. The owners of those mineral estates have the right to access those minerals. In fact, I think there's language that they have maintained the right to explore, develop, drill, transport, and even store minerals from that land. And they have the right to use the surface to do it, unless some surface waiver has been signed in the past. So just understand, does somebody else own the mineral rights? And if they do, have there been any surface waivers or not? And now it's not a deal killer if they don't have a surface waiver. At least at that point you understand that at some level there's a risk that they can come back and extract the minerals and they can use the surface to do it. Okay, the number 2 thing you want to know about before you buy a place is its accessibility. You're going to want to know that you can access that place anytime you want. Otherwise, why make such a large investment? The first thing to notice here is the road you use to access the property. Now, if you're accessing that property directly from a highway or FM road, you're going to be in good shape. But pay attention if it's from a county road, and even more attention if it's through a private easement. What's the road base made out of? Is there a bunch of rock? Is it powdery sand? If rain poured on that thing for days, would you still be able to drive down it? Or would you need 4-wheel drive? Or would you need a Sherman tank? The other thing to notice, to my point earlier, does it cross a floodplain? If creek levels rise, will you still be able to get to and from that property? The other thing to notice, along the roadway that you use to access the property, are there any really small bridges with low weight limits? I've been a contractor before, and I've had to use some pretty extreme measures to get heavy equipment to a property. So if you have some dinky little bridges headed to your place, just something to consider. You may have a hard time getting equipment to and from that place. And more importantly, if you are accessing that property through someone else's private property, you want to make sure that there's a deeded easement. I like handshake agreements. I wish we could really live by them, but the fact is, it's better to have that kind of thing papered out. If you want a title commitment, they're going to insist. Most title companies won't do a title commitment unless there's a deeded easement to the place. Okay, and here's my number 1 thing that you should understand about the land that you're about to buy. The tax valuation. And holy moly, is this important. Look, I'm not a property tax expert, but I have bought and sold a bunch of land, and I've helped people buy and sell a bunch of land. And I can tell you that having a 1D1 open space valuation on a property can save you a ton of money a year. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a deal killer if you don't have a 1D1 open space valuation on that place that you're buying, but you better budget for your taxes in a different way. So what is a 1D1 open space valuation? Well, I'm in Texas, and as far as I know, this is a Texas thing. But essentially, this is known as an ag exemption. But really, it's not an exemption. It's really a valuation. You're going to pay the same percentage of taxes, whether you're in this ag valuation or whether it's a market valuation. But let's work through a quick example. Let's say your place is worth $500,000, $500,000, and your going tax rate for all the school districts and everything else is 2%. If you're paying market rate taxes, that's $10,000 a year. The way a 1D1 open space valuation is, instead of taxing on the market value of the property, they tax you on the agricultural productivity of your place. So your agricultural productivity may mean crops or cattle or hay or timber, or more recently, it could mean producing wildlife. But on that $500,000 place, I'm just going to make up a number, you might be able to produce $20,000 worth of cattle or hay a year. With that 1D1 open space, you're going to be paying 2% of the $20,000 instead of 2% of the $500,000. Meaning you're going to pay only $400 a year. And that's way easier to budget. I don't care who you are. The good news is you should be able to find out really quickly from the listing agent or from the seller what kind of valuation it has. You can also go to the county appraisal district because this is public information and they'll tell you how it's being appraised now. Now, if you're really serious about buying land, go check out my other video where I walk you step by step through the land buying process. I cover the whole thing for you from beginning to closing. And this is the last tip I'm going to give you about buying a rural tract of land. Get yourself a buyer's agent. It doesn't cost you any money and you get to leverage someone else's expertise. Remember, in Texas, the seller is going to pay the commission to the brokers. So if you're going to be using land agents, it's better to have your own to represent your own interests because the listing agent has a fiduciary responsibility to benefit the seller, not you. I really hope you enjoy the video and I hope you find that perfect piece of land that fits right into your family. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and I'll see you on the next video.